such that there's basically sort of a riot in the street kind of an issue. At that point, the emotional concerns will shift rapidly from the underlying cause of the economy to the demonstrated active component of the revolution, which takes off from that point forward.
Okay.
Okay, so initially we're in the revolution now. We're in the early stages of it, where people would gather in the 1700s, they would gather in small villages around notice boards that had basic seditious literature, and they would read this, and eventually they would, there might be small tussles with local loyalists and that kind of thing going on. And we're at that same stage where there's some small level of active movement, but it will eventually take over. But what's going to be the big driver for it is the economic problems of this winter, of this fall and winter. And it may come very much more rapidly than I'd anticipated. And I don't know that any of us have ever really seen anything in modern history. Even the collapse of the Soviet Empire did not destroy a global reserve currency. And so we don't really know how rapidly that will occur. It could happen in a relatively short period of time, even though I happen to think of it as this giant monolith. It could go fairly rapidly. If that's the case, the dollar could effectively die over, say, a 10-day period of time. And that might be how long it takes for the oil-producing states and energy producers of all kinds to decide that they're just no longer going to take dollars anymore. At that point, over those 10 days, the United States becomes effectively bankrupt.
Okay, interesting. Is there anything in your reports that show anything that replaces that? The dollar?
I don't have a... No, I don't show anything that is a model of a new currency or any of that sort of thing. New currencies are curious. In the introduction of the euro, for instance, it took them 10 to 15 years to get it up to the point where they can actually issue the currency, just trying to generate the confidence in the concept. And by the way, the model space seems to suggest that other currencies besides the dollar take huge plunges as well, that it's not merely a U.S. phenomena, that to a certain extent as the Anglosphere empire goes, so goes any of the other paper debt kind of financial systems that are constructed on that model.
Okay.
So a lot of the smaller countries with central banks are going to have some real serious issues.
Interesting. This is really fascinating to me to watch. It's like the whole domino theory kind of thing. You push one domino and they all go tumbling down. And right now, as I'm looking at kind of the whole global situation, there's these little pushes and shoves going along the way. There's these little indicators, and all of this financial reports coming out of all these different countries about whether it be unemployment or about the foreclosures or about social programs having to be cut or people doing without this. I mean, it's already begun, even though the rest of it hasn't caught up to it, so to speak. I mean, the rumblings have been there for quite a while now. So it's kind of it's not a good thing to witness, but it is something to actually watch, that we're actually already in whatever this is that we're going through, the game, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, it's very much floating around in that wave, and it's building, and yeah, we can feel it lifting us up.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. How does that affect the gold and silver prices? I did have that as a question that came in earlier. How would this whole financial market, because I think one of the predictors that was in one of your reports was that silver could go like up to $500 or $600, something like that. And would this change?
It may move it forward. Bear in mind that the model space that we're using for the sharp decline in the confidence really is looking at the archetype at a very high level.
Uh-huh.
So detail level stuff like an actual dollar per ounce price on any given item is very much more suspect in terms of where it would actually end up. The indicator from Mom is that the how do I want to say it? Not the worst, but that the financial tsunami converts to social dysfunction or discord or unrest, however we want to say it, over the course of winter. And so we suspect that the impetus that will allow silver to return to a historical mean relative to gold, and maybe even swing to the other side of that before settling back, will actually manifest sometime perhaps January, February, simply because of the point at which the financial system starts to rumble through the social structure is where we can say that the dollar is going to be effectively ill within the borders of the U.S., whereas the first part of it, the first 4 or 5 months of the dollar death, is actually going to be the dollar as global reserve currency, even though we'll feel it here in the sense of, maybe $800 a barrel oil. I have no way of knowing what the prices are going to be. I'm just pulling numbers out of the air. But it may be something quite that shocking. It might be $40 a gallon gasoline for all I know. And we're going to go through this period of hyperinflation. And that will impact metals, but it won't impact them as severely as the social unrest period. The beginning of that, I think, is when the silver gold will probably reach some form of notional or nominal dollar peak. However, bear in mind that's not a good thing.
Right.
Because during that period of time, we're going to have shortages, famine, social unrest, and very tough and trying times that we're going to have to figure out ways to get through all together.
Well, and I think right here is where I want to make a statement is that, really there are no shortages. What it is what is being presented because, there are stockpiles of food all over this world. I mean, stockpiles of it. And, they are available. They're just not available to most of us. And I just wanted to make that...
It is distribution level issues. However, I've been years ago when I was doing computer consulting, I was charged by this particular outfit I worked for to do a resource analysis. And I had to get very educated in how such things are done. And I followed some of the Buckminster Fuller approaches because he was just brilliant at doing global resource analysis.
Right.
And so I've followed some of these trends for a number of years, say since the 90s, early 90s even. And I have to say that to a certain extent, there is a whole lot of food on the planet, but we are at a very critical stage.
Agreed.
Because it is quite true that we've had, I think we'll be going into the 8th or 9th year. I'm sorry, I just can't remember at the moment. I don't have the notes here. But we'll be going into the 8th or 9th year of reduced grain harvest globally. And we're actually at a point where we have a very precarious balance between the needs of 6.5 billion people on a daily basis and what grain is available right at the moment.
Right.
So there's you have to be careful in how you read some of the numbers that are presented in terms of effective stored grain and so on. A lot of it is like the deep store gold, which the government says, oh, well, we've got this gold deeply stored. Well, what they mean is they haven't dug it out of the ground yet. and so, they've got grain, future stocked. And I thought, well, what's future stocked? Well, it's not yet harvested. Oh, I see. So it's sort of like mythical grain, only they're still counting it as real.
Right,
and
right.
In reality, where the planet as a whole is suffering a grain deficit, and it probably will be this year that, remember we had the food riots, not that long ago.
That's true.
Okay, now those were in part caused by currency problems, but we're going to have those same kind of currency problems again. But in addition to that, we're going to have an exacerbating situation of the climate impacting the grains and all other kinds of production the way it has this year in the U.S. It's happening across the planet. So not only do we have a reduced harvest and a reduced storage, but we also have a very greatly increased need just because of our near-term needs are not being met by near-term harvests.
Gotcha. Well, that makes sense. That makes total sense. Here's what I would love to do. I mean, we've covered a lot of your new stuff that wasn't in the original report of September 15th.
Oh, I'm sorry. That brings up something real quick here. Let me divert back to the gold and silver for just a second. The reason that silver will go up so precipitously is because there's an imbalance in the ratio of gold to silver now that is way beyond the historical mean, and we'll revert back to that, which is historically around 15 ounces of silver to 1 ounce of gold, and we may swing down as low as 10 to 1 or something like that. But the trigger for that is going to be basically what we think is going to be some kind of a default on a huge level from the commodity exchange. And so to a certain extent, the $600 silver may be independent of a corresponding increase in gold. If you were to track the two together, just because we're suggesting $600 silver does not necessarily mean at that point in time you would have the corresponding 10,000 an ounce or whatever it has to be for gold if they were to maintain their current ratio.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay.
Thank you for that clarity. That's good, because a lot of people would be questioning that, or maybe just mistakenly assuming that if one does one thing, then the other has to do the other.
Correct,
so.
and it won't for a while. They'll be out of sync with each other, just like they'll be out of sync with oil, especially in the U.S.
Right, exactly.